All right, we have a wonderful panel here for you. And in case you have not seen an agenda, it is entitled How the Market Wrestling with the Promise of AI. I think we've noticed that AI is a big theme as we've gone throughout the presentations this morning. AI has captured global attention, but the real question is how organizations are adopting and managing the risks. This panel explores how enterprises across industries are approaching AI today, what's working, what's holding them back, and how they see the road ahead. This panel is moderated by Chris Berry, President and CEO of OhioX. So Chris, thank you so much for being moderator.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much for that introduction. And to start, I also want to echo thank you to the Jumpstart team. These are incredible gatherings that showcase Cleveland, showcase Ohio. And for those of you that came from out of state to join us at Ohio VC Fest, thank you. Thank you for making the trip in. Beautiful Cleveland weather in September, and so what better showcase for what is happening here in Cleveland and Ohio, and so just welcome to all of you, and again, thank you to the Jumpstart team. But how the market is wrestling with the promise of AI, certainly a big, meaty topic, and post-lunch, I think it'll really invigorate everyone and bring us back to close out day one really strong. But as we get going, I want to do a quick intro of everyone so you know who is joining me up here on stage. We have Ryan Larkham, Managing Director of Studios at Alloy Partners, joining us from Indianapolis. So thank you, Ryan, for coming on in from out of state. We have Amish Shah, AI Strategic Innovation Leader right here in Cleveland at Eaton. Amish, as I'm sure we're having a conversation, as you'll learn, has worked at some really amazing tech companies and moved back to Ohio about 5 years ago, I believe. From working for some of the biggest name brands that you'll recognize in tech. And so looking forward to learning more from your perspective. We have Dr. Kelly Cohen from the University of Cincinnati. He's the Brian H. Rowe Endowed Chair in Aerospace Engineering. So Dr. Cohen, Kelly, thank you so much for coming up and joining us, driving up 71 and being here in Cleveland. We appreciate it. And then we have Kim Snipes, who's Executive Vice President, Head of Commercial Onboarding and Servicing at KeyBank. So as we think about what Ohio does, higher education, financial services, manufacturing, some of these are really pillars of what our state has to offer. But as we begin, Ryan, I'd love to start with you. With what you do in the venture studio work, you get to see firsthand a really interesting macro perspective from startups to corporates and how they're thinking about AI, the wrestling with the promise, the paradoxes it offers. So maybe if you don't mind kicking us off with a little bit of your perspective, kind of zooming out, and then we'll zoom in.
Sure. Thanks so much, and good to be here with you all. Ryan Larkham, I'm a Managing Director of Studios at Alloy Partners. We're venture builders. We partner with corporations and entrepreneurs to help them launch startups and innovate. And so I've got the unique opportunity to see inside big companies with the challenges they're wrestling with, and then try to bring those challenges external to be solved in startups that either are or not yet existent in the world. And so the thing that we've seen kind of most with AI these days is kind of the movement toward the AI services as software business model, where essentially we're beginning by outsourcing some type of business process that may begin with a person. So we launched a company recently in the insurance space that helps insurance brokers to get renewals processed effectively, lots of paperwork in the background. And currently that startup is a whole bunch of people. Who are capable of doing that, have done that before in the industry. Over time, we build tools for them to softwaretize their work, to productize that work, and then eventually those tools, as they're AI enabled and aggregate data together, can take over those tasks and allow those people to do other types of work that's more efficient and effective, allowing those corporations to lay off whole business processes. And I think we're seeing that increasingly in other industries as well, beyond insurance, right? Financial industries, legal industries, as some of the other ones that are kind of early disruptors.
Yeah, well, the productization of AI, as you mentioned, Amish, this is some of your work at Eaton. Walk through kind of the perspective of your day-to-day, what you're out there sourcing, looking for, as an AI innovation leader at one of Cleveland and Ohio's pillar institutions.
Yeah, hi everyone, and thank you. Yeah, it's an interesting, it's like innovation anywhere else. What we're trying to work backwards from is a problem that can be solved technologically. There's a new tool in our toolkit that's AI, and it means lots of different things. There's kind of your traditional subcategory of AI that was machine learning, and there's potential data problems that can be used, that applies to. But there's also all of the new generative type of capabilities and the derivatives of that in agentic and whatnot that are there. And so what my role is really just trying to like mine for ideas as part of, probably 75% of what I do is kind of build relationships within the organization, understand how teams are functioning, where are their pain points, where are their gaps, where are there efficiencies that can be created, and then doing that ideation to figure out what's the right way that we can solve that, either with internal capabilities or by evaluating capabilities that are either from our known sort of vendors and partners or new ones that we might want to evaluate.
Yeah, and Kim, that's maybe a good segue to you, and then Kelly, we'll get your perspective on some of this in a second, but at KeyBank, this kind of build versus buy, who do you talk to within an organization? If someone out there is building AI tools and you're trying to navigate a Fortune 500 type company, that can be a bit daunting of who exactly do you talk to. And so if you don't mind maybe laying out a bit of the navigation process that you see as part of your institution, but you've also been a part of other Fortune 500 type companies, to help people maybe get a sense of what that kind of lay of the land is.
Sure. Whether it's AI or not, I think you really have to start from the perspective of what is the business problems that need to be solved. And I think that gets also to the crux of getting the value out of whatever the solution may be, whether it's AI or not. So you have to engage with the business partners. Though in my role, I am tightly partnered with my tech partners. Tech is absolutely going to enable us. But at the end of the day, I'm the one that's going to be held accountable for solving some very real business challenges to execute on our strategy. So I need to be talking to these other external partners about, here's my challenges, what are the ways that we can solve it? I just came back from a third-party vendor hosted event last week with Key, and we invited our top 100 vendors, and as we call them, partners. And that's the advice I gave is, if you go and just talk to your tech partner, they might think you have a really great, cool tool, but it really is about solving problems. As I like to say, AI nor any other tool is a hammer looking for that nail. There has to be a problem that you need to apply a solution to. So we definitely encourage, we work as a team, so it's not like you're negating, kind of going to one or the other. But if you're not solving business challenges, and who's going to know that best but the business?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Kelly, at the University of Cincinnati, it's really at the heart of what you all are doing. You have the incredible Cincinnati Innovation District, 18-9 Innovation Hub, digital futures, and all that is happening there. But at the heart of research application, meeting industry needs, and solving for real challenges, you've been seeing this, and as we've talked about financial services, manufacturing, you with an aerospace background, that's another area of deep Ohio expertise and legacy, from NASA Glenn up here in northeastern Ohio to GE Aerospace. Talk a little bit about your perspective as you kind of tackle that between the research side, the industry partners, and kind of melding all those.
Thanks, Chris, and very good afternoon to you all. I have been developing and testing trustworthy AI systems for 31 years now. It's a long period of time. It is before the large language model hype that we're upon right now. The important thing is when you buy a product which has got AI in it, and it is applied to something which is life critical in healthcare and aviation, we want to make sure that there is no hallucination, no excuse for a big mess. You need to be able to demonstrate that trust. And so how do you take that term, which is very subjective and very much part of us as human beings, trust, and try and break that down into building blocks that you can quantify, measure, and then offer to our partners in industry. Verifiable, auditable, transparent, accountable. Something that you can demonstrate that the risks in your AI product are low enough for an insurance company to give you that backing. And then you can say, okay, if you use my product, you are covered. I guarantee you success. And now beyond me as an academic, talking, one of my students sold his thesis to Thales Avionics. Thales Avionics 2 out of every 3 aircraft that take off and land in the world use Thales avionics. They know a thing or two about flight critical and safety critical systems. So when they were shopping around for an AI company, they're headquartered, by the way, in Paris, France. They're about $22 billion a year, 90,000 workers. And their search around the world took them here to Ohio, of all places, because here we create trustworthy AI systems that can deliver on its promise. Okay, by the way, we're having a huge ribbon cutting ceremony when they land up to a floor above me later in April. And it's going to be a big public event because they're not coming here because of low taxes or real estate or cheap students. They're coming here because of our trustworthy, verifiable AI. And that is what we offer to industry, a means forward in which we can guarantee your products to work on a good day, on a bad day, on a day when it rains, when there are storms around you, yet you want to make sure that you are safe in your diagnosis. When you have your mom travel by airplane, your kids, even your mother-in-law, you want to make sure that they reach that destination, right? And so it is important to understand the essence. I'm the president of the North American Fuzzy Information Processing Society, and as part of that society, I know the term fuzzy creates interesting waves with people and reactions, but the idea is the world is fuzzy. There's a lot of ambiguity. How do you make sense of that? How do you guarantee performance? So we use a series of different methods to guarantee that performance. And that is what we want to offer industry. There is a way out. 95% of all LLM-based AI companies and startups have fallen, have folded up, right? Part of the reason is you can't trust them. They don't, they're making promises. They're not aware of what's happening. So we ask ourselves, what's happening to the market? It starts with the word trust, capital T. Thank you.
Can I jump into that one real
Absolutely.
quick? Because even though we're not flying airplanes, but we are, key is we're entrusted with your money. We're entrusted that your money is going to move from A to B. You're entrusting that we're going to give you good advice that will allow you to retire one day and not wonder where all your money went. So what we spend right now, I'm starting up our, we have a strategy. Do you know where we're spending 95% of our time talking about? We're talking about trust. How do I evaluate the models? How do I make sure that they are providing accurate information each and every time before I've ever even tried to write the first line of code? Before, when we have a third party come in and talk about a great solution, we see it and that's great. Now I'm going to dig into how do I trust it? That's where I'm going to spend all of my time. And if we can't get the kind of answers, we can't afford, for the sake of our clients, to take on that risk. That is where we spend our time.
Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it comes back to things that are built here. We take care of people when they're sick. We help bank. We give them insurance. We help things fly, taking flights across the United States and beyond. So incredibly important stuff. But as I'm thinking about this and working with a lot of Fortune 1000 type leaders, so Misha, maybe we can go to you to start on this one. There are 1,000,001 AI ideas, right, when it comes to Gen AI and kind of thinking about pilots for companies. And that's great. You can source a ton. And then you determine a few that are maybe going to be the ones that you actually kind of test out, and you do 5 or 10 or 15. You get everyone together and try it out. But then to take it and have that trust that it can then deploy to scale, how do you think about that? Because just like airplanes, what you all do, it's got to, that steel has got to be strong. And so
Yeah.
how do you navigate that?
It's challenging, and it's certainly challenging in a large corporate setting. I think it does start from is there a problem to be solved here or not, right? That's the first filter, regardless of anything else that comes downstream. And I'll admit that I've made the mistake of being handed a list of 15, 20 companies and saying go look at these, right? These are the buzzwords in AI right now, and let's go evaluate because someone else said something about it. Let's go look, right? And I've had failed. There's one yesterday where we did all the diligence. We did a pilot. There's a bunch of steps to get a pilot approved. And the conclusion we reached, we were just trying to force it. We're like, this is a hammer in search of a nail. and the nail isn't there. There's a different type of nail, or there's a different problem to be solved. This was not it. This wasn't even a relevant problem. We have to go focus on the things that actually matter for our business. And our business, in my case, is actually more corporate function, so it's less front lines, but I deal with 1,000 folks who are running finance, HR, legal, IT, et cetera. But they have problems, and we have to figure out the right technologies to apply to them. Yeah. Once a pilot sort of meets that bar of it being a potential idea, there's a lot of motions to go through to validate it, to validate the accuracy. How well is it solving the problem? Where are humans in the loop? We're still not ready to fully hand over the keys of our car. And then how well of a job did it do? And then what is it going to take to go from an idea or a proof of concept or a pilot to a scalable solution that then fits a global business that's run on 30 different ERPs, that's run, that has folks in different parts of the country, and can be relevant to as many of those as possible.
Yeah. Ryan, you want to maybe jump in here, working with a lot of corporates across the board, but that process, it's tough, it's difficult. Every different company has different, management structures, reporting structures, decision points. How are you seeing in some of your work this all play out?
Yeah, we encourage corporations to be experimenting live right now. And I know that the barriers are high, right? Like you can't just deploy a brand new startup against client data, for example, right? But we're constantly talking about experimenting in fast, cheap, and weird ways. So find opportunities to enable your employees to be experimenting on things that are not mission critical, that perhaps create efficiency opportunities, so that you're learning as an organization how to lay off lower level tasks and elevate your workforce to this next level of tasks, which eventually then work their way up to these more mission critical sorts of functions. So we tend to see folks beginning kind of at the ops level of functionality for AI, right? How are we becoming more operationally efficient before they're then looking at customer-facing opportunities where we can create delightful experiences for our customers. And then hopefully, eventually, building the data sets and business models to begin innovating on the business model itself, right? Offering new ways of making money for the company through data as a service or AI-enabled methods. So start small, experiment widely, and cheaply as possible as well. I think that the danger inside some large organizations is it's not an experiment until it meets $20 million threshold. We're trying to find ways that you can be experimenting with $500,000, $50,000, $20,000, and getting real data that helps inform decision making.
And Kim, I'd love your perspective, and maybe we can talk about ROI now, because that's something that at the end of the day we have to keep that in mind, right? Because if this isn't delivering true value to companies, they're getting ROI. I was in a conversation with a Cincinnati area CIO recently. They're saying, well, we're getting these reports at the end of the week on Teams saying that we saved X amount of time in productivity amongst our team members, and then someone was like, well, how much extra output are you seeing? He's like, well, nothing. So these just it feels in some ways like some of these things can be kind of fake metrics in a way. If you're saving an hour, okay, well, what do you get out of it? How do you actually apply that? How are you all at KeyBank, and maybe across your industry, financial services more broadly, thinking about the ROI component in this?
Sure. Well, and I think we think of a couple different buckets, and I think this will resonate with how we think about AI. There's general productivity tools. Where just like I tell some of the teams, would you think to do your job today if I asked you to get a bunch of numbers and add them up? Would you get a piece of paper out, or would you probably go into Excel? You'd probably go into Excel, and we're all competent to a certain degree. Productivity tools with AI, like a Microsoft Copilot, are going to just be part and parcel with your toolkit. Then and you're right, it's going to be very hard to measure that. Where we then also have decked is each line of business, what is your strategy of how you weave AI into your business strategy? So for example, I'll just use commercial. We know we are going to continue to grow. Commercial bank in Key is a growth area for us. I have folks that do servicing, they do back office fulfillment, et cetera. So I have the digital platforms. So I have to understand how to scale without people, how to get that automation through that experience, end-to-end experience, and make use of those digital platforms. So what we have done is said, okay, so I have to create a strategy. how does AI fit in? And it fits in very well. So, and what I would say that we have also doubled down on is, do you have the data to actually prove that it's making a difference? A lot of people start into their use case, it's like, oh, this is gonna be great. Yeah, but did you have a baseline? Did you actually understand the work that you're doing today so you can then do a baseline and know that you've changed? In our world, we have that baseline. I have 3 years of solid data that knows what it takes to do the work today. Now, for example, we're gonna move into something we call guide. We're gonna have AI to sit, kind of ride side by side with some of those teammates and help guide them through the processes. I will be able to tell if turnaround time has improved. I'm going to be able to tell if they're able to take more cases because I have the data in which to prove that out. When they go to assist, when we get up to that stage of our AI journey and the agents, the AI agents are actually populating and acting on some of the work with humans still in the loop, I'm going to be able to tell the quality of that work, what the volume is that it can do, and what we're doing with the people. When we offset that time, we're repurposing that time into cross-selling. And I'm measuring that too. So I think it gets back to, do you even have the data to tell you that you move from point A to point B, and that that's actually what you're trying to achieve? And so the only other thing I would say is, revenue has always been an elusive one, is can you create more revenue by using AI? What I just talked about with cross-sell, that's dipping our toe into it. But the direct revenue is still kind of that elusive thing that I think we will get there. But again, we have to be smarter with how we measure and commit to actually achieving, revenue improvements.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of heads nodding very vigorously.
Can I
So
hop
Ryan,
in on that? I'm
please.
super curious, just like, from your perspective, that's an incredibly robust and thoughtful way for an enterprise to be thinking about its data structure. Do you recommend startups come into you or tech companies come to you and help to set that baseline, right, as part of their stats? Or do you think that's kind of the job of a large organization, right, who's thinking progressively about technology to do that for themselves?
Both. If you have a way that you can quickly, what I call harmonize the data, because with large corporations, what you do have to at least go in eyes wide open. Large corporations are usually made up of so many different systems, and yes, they talk enough to do what they're supposed to do, but the data is not harmonized, and an easy way to get to it for a solution like AI. If there is some type of capability that helps stitch, as I would say, that data together, great. But if you're coming in, those are definitely some questions I'd ask when you're asking, okay, what do you already have in the way of your data harmonized and available to be used? How have you been measuring what you're doing today so that you know when this is actually proving out? Because if you want to keep scaling and come into that organization and continuing to have a life as a solution, you need to know that your partner within the corporation can help make you successful. So I think it depends. If you have that solution, if you don't, you need to encourage that needs to be to some level, and it could be MVP and you add to it, but at least the basics have to be there for your solution to work on.
Kelly, I saw you nodding a lot on the data point. Any follow-up you wanted to offer there?
Yeah, we have to demonstrate those metrics for return of investment, your ROI. We weigh 3 aspects usually. One is zero tolerance for safety violations. 2 is there's cost and performance. They go hand in hand. The more you want high performing, you have to pay a cost for it. So you want to be able to present different levels of performance and the costs associated with that, so that without compromising on safety, the performance versus cost trade-off is something where the user can say, okay, I have this very niche use case where I'm willing to pay for that added performance. Or this other level of performance for my operations is good enough. I don't want to pay the other 30% that will take me to the other level of performance. So how do you come up with these trade-offs? What we have is we do extensive testing using formal methods, Monte Carlo simulations, runtime assurance, reachability analysis. And what that tells us, which are the zones in which when something adverse happens, there's a malfunction, there's an error in your system, can you still ensure that you're bounded in your response, that once you don't want the gates of hell to open, right? Because that is something that, talk about unaffordability, that can finish you up completely, right? So we try to get there, understand the vulnerabilities of the problem we're looking at, and then come up with alternatives. Today, this is the state of the art, your benchmark. This is how we do business today. But if you utilize this AI, you can go up in one of our use cases. After more than 1 million runs, we demonstrated from 94% to 100% in terms of safety when things go sideways, when there is noise, when there is some malfunctions taking place with your sensors, with your actuators and systems. You want to make sure that you're looking at relevant possibilities, but as you go forward, you then translate that into risks you're willing to take or not to take, right? In addition to those metrics, we also look at anomaly detection. One of the things that plagues not just academia, but the rest of the community, phishing scams, right? We don't have something that works through all the problems. I challenged one of my PhD students. We looked at a trove of 235,000 emails, and we accurately assessed 99.95% of whether that email had a phishing scam, yes or no. So we do that anomaly detection with AI, and we can explain as to why. We also talk about our confidence level. So when you have in part of your learning strategy, your learning data, you've observed similar phenomena as the new use case, then your confidence level goes up, right? You say, oh, I've treated so many patients in this manner, similar symptoms, and I was very successful with my diagnosis. He had temperature, I gave him Tylenol, it worked. So that's a good strategy to give somebody who's got high temperature Tylenol, right? I'm very confident that Tylenol works, at least in addressing that symptom. So the confidence level is something, a black box today, like a large language model, it gives you an answer. Even if there's no precedence, it just feels the need to give you an answer. And there have been cases in which they've fallen off the cliff. Okay, there was a case in late August where a 58-year-old worker who worked for Yahoo, a tech guy, okay, he fell in love with his ChatGPT, a friend, they bonded. He was a bit paranoid. He was seeing patterns of people chasing him in fortune cookies, in the food menu. He drove himself crazy. In the end, he was so convinced that his mother, this is a true story, was about to do something nasty to him. He went and killed his mom. Then he killed himself. Okay, this happened late August this year. Okay, ChatGPT. Now, they want to be agreeable. Oh, wonderful prompt. You're such a terrific guy. Of course you're paranoid because he's trying to hurt you, you know. And so you augment these fears, right? But as a society, where does that stop? How do we demand more accountability from this AI that goes rogue on you? This is not what's meant to happen. You're having a mental issue, we give you this tool that aggravates and causes you to take that action. That's not responsible. So where do we keep our guardrails, right? In utilizing AI to ensure, because we talk about trust, that's where you start losing trust in a system. When it goes unchecked, the behavior, when it aggravates and brings the worst out of us as human beings, to do things that otherwise we wouldn't dare.
And for a corporate, because at the end of the day, data, intellectual property, I mean, there's so much when this stuff goes wild potentially, and keeping it in those boxes, you know, how do large companies, because, you know, keeping it within the four walls of the business itself, and then you're bringing perhaps in partners, vendors from the outside. I mean, that's a huge thing, and there's got to be a lot of trust in order to partner with outside companies. So, I mean, as you're, you know, considering this, and you mentioned a bit ago of, you know, there's just so much out there, and if everyone is building AI solutions and AI tools, you know, one, we talked about sourcing it, but then that trust with an outside vendor and outside partner, because otherwise, you know, just keep it in-house. If, you know, there's so much that could potentially go off the rails.
Yeah, I think that's right. I won't get into the nitty-gritty of governance, and I think you alluded to some of the governance is the same whether it's an AI tool or not, in terms of how data is respected and information is secured. These are principles that corporates have had for years, predating AI, which is like, you have to protect our data, our customer data, our employee data, our IP. From the finance perspective, which I touch a lot, there's sort of the materiality of private information and when that is allowed to be public. There's a whole governance thing that we have to go through and understand about the technology before we even allow ourselves to entertain it. And so there's that threshold of trust, I think, with vendors. I think I'm hopefully addressing part of that. I think like at least some of the things that we're working on today are maybe less emotional from that perspective. We're not using AI for companionship or things like that. There's the productivity layer, but it's a lot of functional needs. Like, what is that thing that we are trying to do? Does the vendor help us accomplish that in a safe, secure, architecturally sound way? Will our data, in the case of these LLMs and things like that, right? A lot of what's happening out there is the free version of it takes in your data and uses it to continuously train the model. Well, that is a absolute guardrail that we have to protect against, right? And so, as a potential founder building a company that's leveraging LLMs, what you need to make sure is that you have enterprise level contracts with your model providers, or any models that you're building, you're ensuring you're not training on our data, right? And so there's those types of safety considerations and trust considerations that we bake into our evaluation process.
And let me jump onto that. I mean, just kind of our key ingredients when we're assessing. One is absolutely, as we think about the models behind whatever this solution is, even better if it's a bring your own LLM, because a lot of times, like in our case, we have vetted very deeply certain LLMs, whether it's Gemini, et cetera. So we have a comfort level. So to hear, hey, ours works and you can bring your own LLM, that is a huge benefit. The training is a non-negotiable. We will expect that in contractual writing that the models aren't being trained. Obviously, with us having the bring our own LLM, that helps with that as well. And also the prompts, right? You're not storing our prompts, you're not taking them somewhere else. Those type of things definitely for I think almost every corporation, absolutely in the FI industry, in the financial services, that's an expectation. And if that is not the case, that is going to usually steer us in a different direction as we think about what the different solutions are.
And I think like what you're hearing is, despite kind of the flashiness of like when things go wrong, they go really wrong, right? But the old wisdom actually has continued to be pervasive, right? Like if you're doing something that is key to corporate strategy, you should probably internalize that. But if you are doing something that's not key to corporate strategy, that is broadly available on the market, then you should externalize that as much as you possibly can, right? Eaton, for example, is not a large language company. It's never going to be a large language company. It's data, its understanding of manufacturing is, right? And that's core to business strategy. And so like parceling off that which you ought to do for yourselves and governing that well and effectively is important. But then allowing the free market to move as quickly as it possibly can will let you learn and move faster, so long as you've got the right guardrails in place between yourself and your vendors. I don't think a lot's changed.
100%. And I know for different companies, a JP Morgan Chase, they're going to go build all their own stuff because they financially can do that, and they choose to.
I'd argue they still shouldn't, though, right?
I was going to say there's a can and should, two different questions. That's not where key is, and actually, to be honest, that's a bit freeing because we don't have to wrestle with that question. We know when we think about build versus buy, to your point, we're saying, where do we have to differentiate? That's where we're going to invest in something that we have in a more custom way. Where do we either have to allow something to, so you come with a very exclusive niche, you are doing the investment to making that the best thing. I'll use an example. As we look at evaluation tools for our AI models, I don't want to go build that. Are all the pieces there to build that? Yes, but I'd rather have a company that's what they get up every day thinking about, making sure they have, thinking about all the different LLMs. I'm going to want to have a company that's what they're investing in. I don't have to use my limited investment dollars for that. I'm going to differentiate. And then where do I just have to have parity? I don't have to have the best of the best. And I might, in that case, I'm like, if I don't have to, it's not the best of the best. I don't have to be different than other people that have the best of the best. if there's a solution out there and I know we're going to have it and I know Huntington might have it and someone else, but I just need parity there, that's a great answer. That's not a kind of I'm giving up answer. That's the right answer for us because we have to decide where to differentiate.
And if we're talking about, wrestling with the promise of AI, the other great unknown is that there's 5 or 6 really, really, really large companies that are pumping billions upon billions upon billions of dollars. And if something at OpenAI flips a switch in 2 months and it changes the game for all of us, how do you guys as corporate leaders think about that, of investing, going in on something and saying, hey, this is what we're going to commit to, knowing that with the pace and evolution of this technology, things can change so rapidly. I mean, we've seen it, over the past 2.5 years where, Kelly, you mentioned that AI is not new, but it's the Gen AI that the rest of us like me can play around with it on our phone. And so how should we be thinking about, that we're all kind of, in some ways, watching what is happening by a few really large, giant companies in this space?
I think that's the toughest part for me, I think, is, and I come from, prior to Eaton, I was much more of a startup. I'm not a founder, and I'm jealous of all of you that are, because it's something I've wanted to do and haven't yet found the way to do it. But I come from startups and earlier stage tech companies, and it's move fast, break things, try everything. There's not as many guardrails on what I can do personally on my computer and what we're allowed to try and experiment with. And Eaton is a very much different, and large corporates are much different. There are teams dedicated to maintaining the stability of our enterprise architecture and what we can and can't add to it. And so how do you balance that need to stay on top of everything, try everything, but also limit your scope to, hey, let's not create a bunch of redundancy, right? So unfortunately, but I think the right decision for the business is we have one productivity chat provider, right? We use Copilot. We have a long-standing agreement with Microsoft for all of our, Outlook teams, et cetera. And Copilot is our tool of choice, and it's built on top of OpenAI. Now that has its advantages and disadvantages. The advantage is, of course, from an architectural perspective, it's one thing to maintain and control. The disadvantage is that everyone is on their phones using ChatGPT at home, and there's this desire to use one or the other. Whether it's real or whether it's better, you can debate that ad nauseum. But that's the choice we have to make, and we have to reckon with that. We have to stay on top of the market. We have to observe what's happening and then continuously kind of evaluate, are we going to change that decision? Is there flexibility for more? What are we going to do? How are we going to think about those kinds of things? But it's tough. The pace of innovation is so fast right now that, even on some of these buy decisions, things that we wouldn't build because they're not core to our business, they're not differentiators for us. It could be the case that this neat, documentation and presentation building tool that's better than anything else in the market today might get built by Microsoft tomorrow, right? Or might get built by Google and Google Slides tomorrow. And what are we going to do if we go out and make a decision to go buy this thing and then tomorrow there's parity somewhere else? So I think we're going to see a lot of that. I don't know what the right answer is. We have to keep trying. We have to keep pushing and seeing what is our business ready for now, and are we comfortable making the risk? What's the type 1 decision that we can walk back? What's the type 2 that is harder to walk back? And then, how do we juggle those two things?
And not to do a KeyBank commercial, but warning, I'm going to do one real quick, is KeyBank is known, our brand is built on having fintech strategy, where we absolutely are looking for those opportunities to partner with different fintechs. Because I think at one point there was a thought that fintechs and banks are enemies. We actually are incredibly good partners. And that's where what you find, and I'd like to say we're the only one, we're really good at it, but there are others that are looking for ways that we're used to having a multitude of solutions in our environment. That is the norm, that is not the exception. And so we have gotten to a point of understanding how to navigate that, bring the best of the best, because what you all are able to do is you get really good at a very specific problem set, and I want that, but then I want the next company that has a different problem set. And when I can stitch that together with the number of clients we can bring to the table versus you all trying to find on your own, that's pretty magical what we can provide to our clients. That is what Key does. So I would say, yes, with things like Copilot, for sure, you're picking maybe a productivity tool of that nature, but I will tell you with our solutions we bring into our commercial products and services and consumer, we absolutely have a history of bringing fintechs into that ecosystem, and we want to. That is where you all give us the competitive edge.
Well, we're starting to wrap up, and this is a conversation that could go on for hours, I'm sure. But Ryan, we'll start with you, and then we'll work our way down with Kim, you wrapping up. But as you think about this promise of AI for the space that you're operating in, each of you individually, how would you maybe sum it up as a final thought?
I think that the next generation of AI that we're going to see that has me really excited is about AI differentiating in verticals. I think we've seen a lot of kind of general models out there, but the opportunity for AI to differentiate in manufacturing industries and aerospace industries with far more context-heavy specific opportunities, I'm really excited about, not just for those industries, because I happen to come out of them, but because they're overlooked broadly by the coasts. And I think that there's a really unique opportunity in the Midwest to build around the industries that we know best and to aggregate that data to create competitive advantage for those verticalized companies.
I agree with that. I think from the corporate world, I think what we're seeing is there are going to be needs for more specific, whether it's functional or business oriented capabilities that AI provides. That's beyond what we think about from like the generative stuff that we see today. I think there will be more developed solutions. Whether we build them, most likely we'll buy them or some combination of the both. But I think those things will settle into norms, not this new frontier that we're talking. We were talking about, like from a people perspective. There's everyone in this room has like 1, maybe 2 years, with you aside, of experience in AI, and so even like trying to hire for this skill is pretty difficult. But I think in 5 years we will look back and be like, well, it's kind of like smartphones or Excel, or it's just part of it now. And I do think we'll solve a little bit more of the deterministic outcomes where we're not hoping AI gives us the right answer, but we will have you all, the founders and folks working on these hard problems, will have found ways for us to be more comfortable and trusting of AI.
Kelly, final thought for you real quickly.
In both aerospace as well as the biomedical field, I feel that we can enhance the quality of life of people. Avoid catastrophes in the aerospace world, and in the medical world, come up with new discoveries quicker, find better diagnostics, have it human-centered, but assist the physician who's limited in his time and how much the insurance company is willing to pay for his time to provide better care. So I'm looking at it from a lot of positives. We just got to make sure that we do the right thing by guaranteeing our testing, ensuring we don't have any vulnerabilities, and making the world a better place.
And I would say we're excited. Maybe a year ago, we wouldn't have used the word agentic. I know some people say it's kind of a flashy word now, but I think the models continue to advance such that agentic is a very real thing. Our strategy absolutely is heading towards the idea of agentic. We're kind of thinking of it as a digital employee, and I just think it's going to continue to advance the way we think about our client experiences and elevating our human experience at the same time creating scale and leverage.
Well, that's a great place to end. Let's thank our panelists for sharing their thoughts. And again, thanks to you all for joining us today.
Thank you.